Hi everyone, welcome to my video. My name is Mr. Toots, and today I'm bringing you a very small noob's guide to Elden Ring. And what I mean by that is that this is definitely not for any veteran players or anyone that even remotely knows what they're doing. This is for the people that died instantly to the grafted scion. Like no, didn't put up any fight at all. Not even 1% of a fight. Instantly died. Or hasn't played any Souls-like games. Like the closest thing that I've played, like as my credentials to this guide that I'm putting out, the closest Souls-like game that I've completed at least would probably be Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. On if not the hardest, the difficulty right below that, because I think it had difficulties. I can't really remember. It's been a while since I played that game, but I definitely didn't play it on like easy or anything like that. But I mean, my like Souls experience is I tried to play Dark Souls 3 several years ago, didn't get past the very first boss, gave up. Good thing I rented the game, so I didn't spend that much money on it. But when I saw this coming out, it looked so good, and I tried to go in relatively blind to the actual playthrough. I just saw bits and pieces of it, saw a lot of good reviews, stuff like that. Decided to pick it up, take the chance. And I'm loving it so far. So hopefully this is a little bit of um, a push for people that are kind of in my similar circumstance. They're thinking like if they want to get it or not. The game is great for someone that never really played Souls-like games, never really enjoyed them. The game is amazing. So to start it off, probably the first thing, most important thing for noobs to Souls-like games is really just take your time. Take all the time in the world, right? It took me like 12 to 14 hours to get to the first main story boss. There's so much to do and see and stuff like that in the open world, that, you know, if you're running around the open world and you run into something that you can't necessarily defeat yet, because there are some bosses put in, or mini bosses put into the world, that you're really not supposed to fight, or at that time as soon as you see them. For example, there's the mini boss right in the open world right as you exit the tutorial level. That guy is someone that is relatively end game. I wouldn't say end game, but he does carry like the loot on him. Can't really even use for quite a while. So that's kind of the thing to keep in mind. You're going to run into stuff that even Souls veterans know, like you're not supposed to defeat it. Souls veterans are going to take it on anyway. Those are the type of guys that probably tried to take on Ganon in Breath of the Wild with a stick and a pot lid. But you can go around, you can collect different weapons and armors and upgrade things, and then go tackle the hard mini bosses and bosses and stuff like that. So just take your time. Like, you'll run into a cave, you're going to run into a boss you can't defeat. You might lose your runes, but pick up what you can, come back to that at a later time. I had to do that several times, and things like that. Does lead me into the next point, which is runes, right? Those are the currency in the game. They're the only thing that you lose upon death. If you haven't seen anything on a Souls-like game, basically when you die, your currency, whatever it is, souls, runes, whatever, will drop in a pile. And then if you can get to it, you can recover them. But if you die trying to get to that pile, you will lose them. You will lose whatever is in that pile. So my piece of advice for people new to the game, probably just spend your runes as much as possible. There are ways to level up. There's gear you can level up. There's things you can buy. Just spend your runes as much as possible. And as far as like hoarding runes to like pay for big stuff or anything like that down the road, there are things called golden runes. Basically, their sole purpose, it's kind of like nuggets or pearl, or I want to say nuggets from Pokemon. All their sole purpose is to sell for currency. So you take the golden runes, you exchange them for actual runes, and the golden runes, as far as and is the same as any item, you can't lose it upon death. So you can hoard those golden runes So when you want to pay for something big, you have those on hand just in case you're trying to hoard regular runes and you die. So keep that in mind. Like spend your runes as much as possible, just because, like I said, you might run into a cave boss and you do get stuck into the boss fight. The only way to leave is either to defeat the boss or to die. So if it's something that is just too tough for you in that moment, then unfortunately you're gonna lose those runes that were on you. So just spend them as much as possible, and also, spend it on stuff that like levels you up and get items and things like that. That'll help you progress through the game. One of those, this is point number 3, I suppose. There is a point in which you can purchase a bow, and I highly recommend purchasing a bow. If you don't start with the samurai class, which is, I think, one of the favorited classes to start with, other than, I guess, prophet, because one of the spells you learn is like super broken. But as far as weapons go, a bow is very useful. Not a lot of the classes start with them. I honestly, off the top of my head, I can only think of the samurai that starts with it. Long range is definitely useful in picking off groups of enemies and stuff like that. When you kill wildlife in the game, you can collect stuff to craft arrows, so you have an easier way to supply it other than like buying arrows and stuff like that. But highly recommended. It takes a little bit to get to a bow if you don't start off with it, but I would make sure that to prioritize trying to get that. It definitely will come in handy later. And continue on with equipment tips. One thing that took me a little bit to learn, and really it was just because I noticed a cutscene or loading screen tip from the game that mentioned it. You do have a carry weight in the game, and the in-game tip said that basically if you're at 70% or more, it's basically considered 70% or more of your carry weight. You're considered under heavy load, and your roll dodges are less effective, meaning you won't roll as far or as quickly. It's one thing that I didn't really notice. I just noticed that my rolls didn't seem like I was going very far, and I didn't really understand why until I saw that note. And the way that the carry weight works is it's really just what's equipped on you. So you can carry pretty much any number of things, but the weight is actually what is on your person equipped. Ready to go. So the hotbar for all the weapons and your armor and stuff like that is what actually contributes to that weight. And you want to try to make sure you stay in a medium load range. You can see it under your stats. Medium load at least allows you to have a pretty normal range for dodges, and it means that you'll probably carry some lighter armor on you, or maybe not as many weapons, variety and stuff like that. But in these games, you do really want to prioritize being able to dodge more than being able to take a hit, honestly. When you're starting out, you'll probably want to roll with some pretty beefy armor because you're going to take a few hits. So maybe that plus just don't carry a lot of equipment on you. And essentially, you can play around with what's equipped to make sure you're in that medium load range. But that's what I would recommend. You want to be able to dodge out of the way as your primary way to negate damage, rather than taking damage and hoping that your armor is good enough to negate a decent portion of it. Because no damage is better than that, because you're never going to the negation from the armor is not going to be so substantial that a dash wouldn't have been better, if that makes sense. You don't have to run around with just like full light armor like you're a rogue and get one shot. There's a happy medium that you can kind of play with the numbers and sit at. But that's something that I picked up that will probably help you in the early game, because I didn't learn that until a little bit later. I just couldn't figure out why I couldn't dodge out of the way of things. One kind of super random tip, I don't know if this is going to help people, but essentially anything that can be targeted can be attacked, and most of those things are going to be hostile towards you. If you see something you can't target it, it usually means that it's an NPC. You'll want to talk to every NPC you see. Some of them give you very useful items when you talk to them. Some of them are merchants. Some of them give you upgrades. Some of them give you quests and stuff like that. So you want to make sure you're talking to all the NPCs, and that's the easiest way to know like you're not going to get like jumped or anything like that. Again, I've only played like early games, so some of that can change later depending on story and things like that. But at least for right now, the ones that you run into in the beginning are safe, if that makes sense. And you want to talk to them multiple times in the same instance. Just hit talk over and over again until they either say the same thing or stop talking to you, essentially. And or when you visit areas again, just make sure to talk to the NPCs. Sometimes there's new dialogue. Sometimes they'll give you a quest, things like that. Just talk to the NPCs. Now for the last 2 points, they're going to be pretty generic, and you've probably heard it from a million people already, but combat, the easiest way to approach combat is to scout out the boss itself. Circle the arena, figure out what his attacks are doing, how long in between when he does one attack versus a follow-up. Because like the worst thing you want to do is he does an attack, you wait, and you hop in to try to do some damage, and he just has an immediate follow-up that does way too much damage. This game is about trying to take as least amount of damage as possible. So you want to figure out when you can actually get those strikes in successfully and get out without taking damage. Like even if it's a game of almost attrition where you're just waiting for that opportune time to do 2 hits and then you back off and dodge around and then you wait for those. Like that's how I was able to defeat the grafted scion, that very, very first boss that most people just wipe to. On a second playthrough is that it became this like war of attrition. We were just circling the arena until he did a very specific attack that I could counter easily. That way I could win successfully. So a lot of battles you're going to want to go into first with that mindset. Like honestly, you want to go into these boss battles knowing that you're probably not going to win the first like 5 attempts. If you have that mindset already, you'll be a lot better off than thinking that you're going to go into a boss fight and win it in that first boss fight like you probably would any other game. That's probably the best piece of advice I can give. It kind of helps keep like a level head while you're playing the game. Like for me, when I was attacking a boss and I got to a very low health bar, and even if I wiped there, like in my mind, it was just like, okay, I know I can defeat this boss. Like I got him that low. I can do this. I just have to play a little bit better. Either not get greedy towards the end or not make a mistake right at that end. Definitely wait for those open times and stuff like that. Yeah, the game is hard, and this is kind of my final point, I guess. If you want more like combat tips, that's where I would go seek out veteran Souls players, because those are the guys that have that shit down to like a science on how to defeat like even like certain bosses and stuff like that. There's different mechanics. There's parrying. There's different types of weapons and things like that. I just use the spears or pole arms because it helps keep enemies at a distance. But that might not be the best for everyone. It might not even be the best in general, to be honest. So seek out other guides if you're really having a hard time. I've made it through most. I've made it at least through the first story boss, which a lot of people are saying is like a really hard boss, which is normal for Souls games. Without like a guide on how to defeat him. Granted, you get a lot of help. There's a little bit of hand holding the game can do with summons and stuff like that to give you a little bit more help. That I think is a fair replacement for a difficulty slider, because it really just allows you like if you want to use it or not. But yeah, last point, and it's the point that everyone brings up when people get this, when they get kind of complainy about games like this, is that the game is supposed to be hard. The Souls-like genre generally doesn't have difficulty sliders. Like I think Jedi Fallen Order was probably one of the first Souls-like games to have a difficulty slider and also do it pretty well. It actually told you like what gets changed when you change the difficulty, as opposed to just enemies have more health and you do less damage. Um, but in the traditional Souls-like games, there is no difficulty slider. It is just hard, and it's like that for a reason. And it's cliche to say, and you probably heard it all the time if you have any friends that play Souls-like games. But the reward for beating a boss that is hard actually is like super rewarding. I always kind of rolled my eyes when I heard that, having not played Souls games very much. But it's very much is true. Like there's a certain fun that you have, like in Borderlands, just tearing things up and things like that. But the actual like satisfaction of beating a boss in this game is kind of insane. Um, and there is only like certain people that really have fun with the difficulty of a game. I'm really not one of those. But I think when it's done well and you kind of go into the game with the mindset of that, it works out. Like if you go into a game like, say, God of War, for example, and you're just having a fun time just tearing through stuff, and then you happen upon something hard, it's a lot less fun than playing a hard game and knowing like, I'm gonna go into this boss and I'm probably gonna die the first 5 times at least. But when I finally kill it on the 20th time I tried, it's so much better than like any of those other games, honestly. And a lot of people will say that, like picking up Souls games for the first time, and things like that. So that's what you should keep in mind. This game is unforgiving. It is why it is a meme of you died over and over and over and over and over again. Like it's there for a reason, and it's enjoyable for a reason. And I don't think you'll get that without trying it. And I think there's a consensus among most veteran Souls players that this is probably the best game to get into if you haven't played Souls-like games. In my opinion, the only better one would probably be Jedi Fallen Order, because it did have a difficulty slider, but it had the mechanics of Souls-like games, where it's very important to like parry and not take damage, and you lose currency when you die, stuff like that. Like it had the Souls-like mechanics, so you just could change the difficulty. But in terms of like a From Software Souls game, this is probably one of the best ones that could get you into the genre. Like playing this makes me want to go back and play Dark Souls 3 and actually complete the game instead of giving up at the first boss. So hopefully like I can leave you, viewer, with that. It's a really fun game. It is a $60 price point. If you can rent it from somewhere, this is one of those games that you rent to make sure that you're going to want to play it, or play it at a friend's house. I really wish they would give you kind of like a demo-ish of it or something like that. Just so you know that it's something you want to spend $60 on. But there is a big consensus that it is worth it. As a person who actively did not like Souls-like games and took a plunge to play this game, it is very fun. And I will play this game until completion, even if it takes my entire being and soul to do so. There's not much else to go into. I might make a follow-up if I think of other things. I might make like a spoilery beginner's guide as well, just because I'm coming from a position of someone that is in the same position. I'm a noob at the game, the mechanics and stuff like that, versus veteran Souls players that have seen this 100 times now, just open world. You know what I mean? So I don't know. You can catch me at other places, Twitch, mainly. Honestly, I stream the game. If you want to pop in and say hi, all the stuff is in the description. Leave a comment if you're enjoying the game. If you're one of those that's never played a Souls game and is picking it up, how you're enjoying it. Because I've seen both sides. I've seen people still complaining about the difficulty of the game, and I've also seen people saying this is probably the best game I could have played to get me into Souls-like games. Like I've seen both sides, so I want to hear yours. If you watch this to completion, I appreciate you, and I will catch you guys later. Thank you. Bye.